Kang Tae-ho was nobody special. At least, that is what he told himself every morning when he woke up in his tiny room on Throne Station Arendis. The room was small, barely big enough for a bed and a workbench. But it was his. And that was enough. Tae-ho was 29 years old. He came from Earth's outer colonies, from a small moon called Settlement 7. His father had been a mechanic. His grandfather had been a mechanic. And now Tae-ho was a mechanic too. It was the only thing he knew how to do. 3 years ago, the company he worked for went bankrupt. The ships stopped coming. The payments stopped coming. And Tae-ho found himself alone in the galaxy with nothing but his tools and his skills. So he drifted. He moved from station to station, planet to planet, fixing things that other people said could not be fixed. He never stayed in one place for long. He never made friends. He just worked, earned enough money to eat and sleep, and then moved on. 6 months ago, he arrived at Throne Station Arendis. It was the capital of the Kelthari Empire, one of the most powerful alien civilizations in the known galaxy. The station was enormous. It stretched across space like a silver flower, with towers and domes that glowed with soft blue light. Millions of beings lived here, and at the very top, in a palace made of crystal and metal, lived the Kelthari queen. Tae-ho did not care about queens or empires. He cared about finding work. The Kelthari were a proud people. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with silver skin that shimmered like metal. Their eyes were large and bright, and their bodies were covered with patterns that glowed different colors depending on their emotions. Blue meant calm, red meant anger, gold meant joy. They were beautiful in a strange and terrifying way. They were also warriors. The Kelthari had built their empire through conquest. They valued strength, honor, and combat above all else. And they looked down on humans. To the Kelthari, humans were weak. Humans were small. Humans were primitive creatures who had only recently learned to travel between stars. They were useful for simple labor. But nothing more. Tae-ho did not argue with them. He simply set up his repair stall in the lower market district, where the poor and forgotten lived, and waited for customers. At first, nobody came. The aliens walked past his stall without looking. Some laughed at the small human sitting behind his workbench, surrounded by tools and spare parts. Others made rude comments in their own languages, thinking he could not understand. But Tae-ho could understand. He had spent years learning alien languages, studying alien technology, taking apart machines that humans had never seen before. He knew more about Kelthari tech than most Kelthari did. He just needed a chance to prove it. The chance came 3 weeks after he arrived. A young Kelthari woman approached his stall. She was a servant, judging by her simple clothes. In her hands, she carried a broken communication device. Her patterns glowed, pale blue with worry. "The repair shops say it cannot be fixed," she said quietly. "But I need it. It belonged to my mother." Tae-ho took the device and examined it. The casing was cracked. The internal circuits were burned. Most mechanics would have thrown it away. But Tae-ho saw something else. He saw how the pieces fit together. He saw where the damage was and where it was not. He saw a path forward. "Come back tomorrow," he said. The woman looked doubtful, but she left the device with him. Tae-ho worked through the night. He rebuilt the circuits using parts from 3 different machines. He reprogrammed the software by hand. He polished the casing until the cracks were almost invisible. When the woman returned the next day, she cried. The device worked perfectly. It even played an old recording of her mother's voice, something she thought was lost forever. She paid him double what he asked, and she told her friends. Word spread slowly through the lower districts. The human mechanic could fix anything. It did not matter if the device was old or broken or alien. If you brought it to him, he would find a way. Tae-ho's stall became busy. Not with rich customers or important people, but with servants, workers, and refugees. People who could not afford the expensive repair shops in the upper levels. People who had nowhere else to go. Tae-ho helped them all. He charged fair prices, sometimes less than fair. He worked long hours, often forgetting to eat or sleep. He did not do it for money. He did it because fixing things was the only way he knew how to connect with the world. Months passed. Taeho's reputation grew, but he remained in the lower districts. He did not try to climb higher. He did not seek fame or fortune. He was content with his small room, his workbench, and his tools. Then one night, everything changed. It was late, long past midnight. Most of the market stalls were closed. Taeho was cleaning his workbench, preparing to sleep, when he heard footsteps. A figure stood at the entrance of his stall. The figure wore a dark cloak with a hood that hid their face, but Taeho could see silver skin beneath the hood. "Kelthari, are you the human mechanic?" the figure asked. The voice was female, soft but urgent. "I am," Taeho said. The figure looked around nervously, checking to make sure nobody was watching. Then she reached into her cloak and pulled out something wrapped in black cloth. She placed it on Taeho's workbench and unwrapped it carefully. Taeho's breath caught in his throat. It was a piece of armor. But not ordinary armor. This metal was unlike anything he had ever seen. It shifted and flowed like liquid silver. Crystals were embedded in its surface, connected by threads of light that pulsed like veins. It was alive. He could feel it humming with energy, though that energy was fading fast. "Can you fix it?" the woman asked. Taeho touched the armor gently. It was cold. Dying. The crystals were cracked, and the light was flickering like a candle in the wind. He knew this type of armor. He had read about it, studied diagrams and ancient texts. It was called Velshar, the sacred battle armor of the Kelthari. Each suit was bonded to its wearer, connected to their life force and their soul. It was more than a weapon. It was a part of them. Only the greatest Kelthari warriors wore Velshar. And only the royal family wore armor with crystals that glowed like this. Taeho looked up at the cloaked woman. "Where did you get this?" The woman's hands were shaking. Her patterns glowed red with fear. "It belongs to Queen Vera," she whispered. "And if it is not repaired, our empire will fall." Taeho stared at the dying armor on his workbench. He thought about his small life, his simple work, his desire to stay invisible. Then he thought about the armor, about the challenge it represented, about the impossible puzzle waiting to be solved. He made his decision. "Tell me everything," he said. The woman's name was Harin. She was a handmaiden in the royal palace, one of the servants who attended to Queen Vera personally. She had served the royal family for 15 years, since she was a young girl. Her loyalty was absolute. She sat across from Taeho in his small repair stall, her cloak still wrapped tightly around her body. Her patterns flickered between blue and red as she spoke, showing her fear and worry. "It happened 1 week ago," Harin began. "The queen was returning from a diplomatic meeting on the outer moon. Her ship was ambushed." Taeho listened carefully. He kept his hands on the armor piece, feeling its fading warmth. "There were 12 attackers," Harin continued. "Assassins. They breached the ship and fought their way to the queen's chamber. The royal guards held them off as long as they could, but 3 assassins reached her." "And the queen?" Taeho asked. Harin's patterns glowed with something like pride. "She killed them all. Queen Vera is one of the greatest warriors our empire has ever seen. But during the fight, one of the assassins used a weapon we had never seen before. Some kind of energy blade that cut through her Velshar like paper." She pointed at the armor piece on the workbench. The crystals were cracked, and a deep gash ran through the metal. Black marks surrounded the wound, as if the armor had been burned from the inside. "The armor protected her," Harin said. "It took the blow that would have killed her, but the damage was too great. The core matrix shattered. The bond between the queen and her armor was broken." Taeho examined the damage more closely. He had seen broken machines before, thousands of them. But this was different. The armor was not just broken. It was dying, like a living creature bleeding out. "This is the crown armor," Taeho said quietly. "The armor passed down through the royal bloodline." Harin nodded. "It has been in the royal family for 12 generations. Over 800 years, every queen has worn it, every queen has been bonded to it, and now it is broken. Yes, Teho understood the problem now. The Velshar was not just equipment, it was a symbol. The crown armor represented the queen's right to rule. It showed that she was chosen by her ancestors, blessed by their spirits. Without it, she was just another Kelthari. What about your smiths? Teho asked. Your engineers? The Kelthari are famous for their metalwork. Harin shook her head sadly. They cannot repair it. The techniques used to create the crown armor were lost centuries ago. Our smiths can make new Velshar. Yes, but they cannot restore an ancient bond. They cannot heal what has been broken. She leaned forward, her eyes desperate. We brought the armor to the greatest masters in the empire. They all said the same thing. It is impossible. The crown armor is dead. Then why come to me? Teho asked. I am just a human. A mechanic from the lower districts. Harin was quiet for a moment. Her patterns shifted to a soft purple, the color of uncertainty. I heard stories, she said finally. The servants talk. They say there is a human in the lower market who can fix anything. They say he repaired a communication device that was 100 years old. They say he rebuilt a medical scanner using parts from a trash compactor. Teho smiled slightly. People exaggerate. Perhaps, Harin admitted, but I have no other choice. The Unity Summit is in 4 days. Representatives from every major power in the galaxy will attend. If Queen Vera appears without her crown armor, our enemies will see it as weakness. And then, Harin's patterns flashed red. Then they will attack. The noble houses will turn against her. General Dohan, who has wanted the throne for years, will challenge her claim. Civil war will follow. Millions will die. Teho looked at the armor piece in his hands. Such a small thing. Just metal and crystal and light. But it held the fate of an empire. I cannot promise anything, he said slowly. I have never worked on Velshar before. I do not know if human techniques will work on Kelthari technology. Will you try? Harin asked. Teho thought about his quiet life. His simple work. His desire to stay invisible and uninvolved. He could say no. He could give the armor back and return to his normal existence, but he could not stop looking at the damaged metal. The cracked crystals called to him. The dying light whispered to him. It was a puzzle. A challenge. The most difficult repair job he had ever seen. And Kang Teho had never walked away from a challenge. I will try, he said. But I need more than just this piece. I need to see the whole suit. I need to understand how all the parts connect. Harin hesitated. The complete armor is in the palace. No outsider has ever been allowed to touch it. Then make an exception. That is not my decision to make. Teho set down the armor piece and met Harin's eyes. You came to me because you were desperate. Because nobody else could help. But I cannot work miracles with only a fragment. If you want me to save your queen's armor, you must give me access to all of it. Harin stared at him for a long moment. She seemed to be weighing something in her mind. There is one more thing, she said quietly. The Velshar is bonded to its wearer. To repair the bond, you may need to meet the queen herself. Teho's eyebrows rose. Meet the queen? The armor is connected to her life force. Her energy. Understanding the bond may require understanding her. This was unexpected. Teho had never met royalty before. He had never wanted to. Royalty meant politics. And politics meant trouble. But if that was what the job required, then that was what he would do. Arrange it, Teho said. Bring me to the palace. Let me see the armor and meet the queen. Give me the tools and materials I need. And give me time. How much time? Teho looked at the armor piece again, studying the damage, calculating the work needed. 3 days, he said. I will need 3 days. Harin's patterns flickered with hope and doubt. 3 days was not much time. The summit was in 4 days. There was almost no room for error, but she had no other options. I will speak to the palace, Harin said, standing up. Pack your tools, human. By tomorrow morning, You will be in the royal chambers. She wrapped the armor piece in its black cloth and tucked it back under her cloak. At the entrance of the stall, she paused and looked back. What is your name? She asked. Kang Taeho. Harin nodded slowly. Kang Taeho. If you succeed, you will be a hero to our people. If you fail. She did not finish the sentence. I know, Taeho said calmly. If I fail, I will probably be executed for touching sacred relics. Harin's patterns flashed with surprise. She had not expected him to understand. You are strange, human, she said. I am a mechanic, Taeho replied. I fix things. That is all I know how to do. Harin disappeared into the night, her cloak swirling behind her like smoke. Taeho sat alone in his stall, surrounded by tools and spare parts, and the quiet hum of the station. He looked at his hands. Tomorrow, those hands would touch the most sacred armor in the Kelthari Empire. Tomorrow, his life would change forever. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he studied. He pulled out every datapad he owned, every file he had collected on Kelthari technology. He read about Velshar construction, about bonding rituals, about the history of the crown armor. By morning, his eyes were tired, but his mind was sharp. He knew the challenge ahead. He knew the risks. He packed his tools carefully, one by one. Each tool was an old friend. Each tool had helped him solve problems that others called impossible. Now they would help him once more. When Harin arrived at dawn, Taeho was ready. Let us go, he said. And together, they walked toward the palace in the sky. The royal palace was nothing like Taeho had imagined. He had expected cold halls and stern guards. Instead, he found warmth and light. The walls were made of a crystal that captured the light of distant stars and scattered it into rainbows. Gardens grew in every corner, filled with flowers that sang soft melodies when the wind touched them. Fountains sprayed water that glowed silver, and the air smelled sweet, like honey in spring rain. But the beauty did not hide the tension. Taeho could see it in the faces of the servants. He could hear it in the whispered conversations that stopped when he walked past. He could feel it in the way the guards gripped their weapons. The palace was afraid. Harin led him through corridors and up floating platforms until they reached a pair of massive doors. 2 guards stood before them, their Velshar armor glowing with soft blue light. He is expected, Harin said. The guards looked at Taeho with disgust. A human, in the royal palace. It was unthinkable. But they had their orders. They stepped aside, and the doors opened. The throne room was enormous. Pillars of silver rose toward a ceiling painted with images of ancient battles. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of black crystal, sat Queen Vera. She was younger than Taeho expected. In human years, she might have been 30. Her silver skin glowed with health, and her patterns shifted in slow waves of deep blue. Her eyes were sharp, bright silver that seemed to look straight through him. She wore simple robes instead of armor, but she radiated power. Around her stood advisors, generals, and nobles. They all turned to look at Taeho as he approached. Their patterns flashed with colors of anger, disgust, and contempt. A human, in the throne room, walking toward the queen. Taeho ignored them all. He stopped at the proper distance and bowed his head slightly. Not too deep. He was not a servant, and he would not pretend to be one. So, Queen Vera said, her voice was cool, controlled. You are the human mechanic my handmaiden found. I am, Your Majesty, Taeho replied. Harin tells me you believe you can repair my crown armor. The armor that our greatest masters have declared dead. I do not believe, Taeho said. I know. The room exploded with angry voices. Nobles shouted insults. Generals demanded his execution for such arrogance. Advisors called for the guards, but Queen Vera raised one hand, and the room fell silent instantly. She studied Taeho with those silver eyes. Her patterns did not change color. She was completely calm, completely controlled. That is quite a claim, she said. What makes you think a primitive human can succeed where Kelthari masters have failed? Taeho met her gaze. He knew he should be afraid. One wrong word, and he could be killed. But fear had never helped him fix anything. "Because I see machines differently," he said. "Your masters look at the crown armor and see tradition, history, sacred art. I look at it and see a machine. A system of parts working together. And every system can be understood. Every system can be repaired. You think our sacred armor is just a machine? I think everything is a machine, Your Majesty. The stars are machines that burn hydrogen. Bodies are machines that process food and air. Empires are machines that process people and resources. Once you understand how something works, you can fix it when it breaks." The nobles muttered angrily, but Queen Vera's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said. "I have been called both," Tejo admitted. Queen Vera stood from her throne and descended the steps. She moved with the grace of a warrior, each step precise and powerful. She stopped directly in front of Tejo, close enough that he could see the tiny pattern swirling in her eyes. "I will give you a chance," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "Not because I believe you can succeed, but because I have no other options." She turned to address the room. "Bring the crown armor. Let the human examine it." Servants rushed to obey. Minutes later, they returned carrying a stand draped in white cloth. When they removed the cloth, Tejo saw the complete crown armor for the first time. It was beautiful, and it was dying. The armor covered the entire body, from head to feet. Each piece was connected by threads of light that pulsed like blood vessels. Crystals dotted the surface like stars, their light fading in and out like breathing. The metal shifted constantly, flowing like water frozen in mid-motion, but the damage was clear. A massive wound cut across the chest plate, and the crystals around it were dark and cracked. The threads of light near the wound flickered weakly, and some had gone completely dark. The armor was fighting to survive, but it was losing. Tejo walked around the stand, examining every angle. He touched the metal gently, feeling its texture, its temperature, its vibration. He pressed his ear against it and listened to the faint hum inside. The court watched in horrified silence. No commoner had ever touched the crown armor. No alien had ever been allowed near it. But Queen Vera said nothing, so they could do nothing. After several minutes, Tejo stepped back. "I can fix it," he said. "How?" Queen Vera asked. "The core matrix is shattered. That is the central problem. Everything else, the dark crystals, the failing connections, they are symptoms of the core damage. If I can rebuild the core matrix, the rest of the armor should heal itself. Our masters said the core matrix cannot be rebuilt. The techniques are lost." "Your masters are wrong," Tejo said bluntly. "The techniques are not lost. They are forgotten. There is a difference. I have studied old records, old diagrams. I understand the principles. I just need to adapt them with modern methods." "Human methods?" "Yes." The room erupted again. Using human techniques on the sacred crown armor was blasphemy. It was an insult to every queen who had worn it before. But Queen Vera silenced them once more. "If you fail," she said to Tejo, "you will be executed. You will have touched sacred relics without producing results. That crime carries only one punishment." "I understand. If you succeed." She paused, considering. "Name your price." "Gold? Land? A ship? What does a human mechanic desire?" Tejo thought about it. He could ask for wealth beyond imagination. He could ask for power, status, protection. He could change his life. Forever. But none of that interested him. "Just let me do my job," he said. "That is all I want." Queen Vera's patterns flickered with surprise. For a moment, her calm mask cracked, and Tejo saw something underneath. Curiosity. Interest. "You are strange," she said softly. "I am a mechanic," he replied. "Nothing more." Queen Vera turned to her servants. "Give him a sealed workshop. Provide whatever tools and materials he requests, and give him 3 days." She looked back at Tejo. 3 days, human. That is all you have." Tejo bowed his head. 3 days is enough. The The servants led him away, the crown armor floating behind on its stand. As he left the throne room, Taeho felt the queen's eyes on his back. She was watching him, studying him, trying to understand this strange human who spoke to her without fear. Taeho did not look back. He had work to do. In a sealed chamber deep within the palace, surrounded by the greatest challenge of his life, Kang Taeho began to do what he did best. He began to fix something broken. The sealed chamber was cold and quiet. Taeho preferred it that way. No distractions, no visitors. Just him, his tools, and the dying armor. For the first 6 hours, he did nothing but study. He walked around the armor, taking notes. He used scanning devices to map its internal structure. He traced the threads of light with his fingers, feeling how they pulsed and flowed. The more he studied, the more he understood. The crown armor was not just a machine, it was alive. Not alive like a person or an animal, but alive like a tree or a coral reef. It grew. It changed. It responded to its environment. The metal was not solid but made of millions of tiny cells that could shift and reshape themselves. The crystals were not just decorations but organs that processed energy. The threads of light were nerves that carried information throughout the body. The armor was a living organism made of metal and crystal instead of flesh and bone. And like any living thing, it could be healed. Taeho worked through the first night without sleep. He carefully removed the damaged sections of the chest plate, setting them aside for repair. He cleaned the cracked crystals with solutions he had mixed himself. He traced the broken threads of light and mapped where they needed to reconnect. The work was delicate and precise. One wrong move could cause more damage. One mistake could kill the armor forever. But Taeho's hands were steady. They had always been steady. Even as a child, when other boys were playing games, Taeho was taking apart machines and putting them back together. His hands knew what to do even when his mind was uncertain. On the second day, he began the real work, rebuilding the core matrix. The core matrix was the heart of the armor. It was a sphere of crystal about the size of a fist, located in the center of the chest plate. Inside the sphere, thousands of tiny lights swirled in complex patterns. These lights were memories, emotions, and fragments of every queen who had ever worn the armor. The sphere was cracked down the middle. The lights inside were scattered and confused, spinning without direction. The bond between the armor and Queen Vera had been severed completely. Taeho studied the cracks carefully. Kelthari masters had said they could not be repaired because the bonding techniques were lost. But Taeho saw something they had missed. The cracks were not random. They followed specific lines, specific patterns. The weapon that had damaged the armor had not just broken the sphere, it had disrupted the energy flow inside, causing the sphere to tear itself apart. If Taeho could restore the energy flow, the sphere might heal on its own. He worked for hours, using tools that he had modified himself. Human welding techniques, adapted for alien crystal. Human programming methods, translated into Kelthari code. He was bridging two worlds, forcing technologies that had never met to work together. Slowly, carefully, the cracks began to close. By the evening of the second day, the core matrix was whole again. The sphere was smooth and perfect, without a single crack. But the lights inside were still scattered. The bond was still broken. Taeho sat back and rubbed his tired eyes. He had rebuilt the heart, but the heart was empty. It needed something to bring it back to life. He studied his notes again, searching for answers. The Velshar bonded with its wearer through resonance. The armor would scan the wearer's neural patterns, their life force, their very soul. If the patterns matched, the bond would form. But the crown armor had been bonded to Queen Vera's bloodline for 800 years. It only recognized one pattern, the pattern of the royal family. And that pattern had been erased when the sphere cracked. Someone needed to provide a new pattern, a starting point, a spark to reignite the fire. Taeho looked at the armor. The armor seemed to look back at him, its crystals flickering weakly. "You need help," Taeho said quietly. "You cannot start on your own. Someone needs to jumpstart you." The armor did not respond, but Teho felt something, a faint pull, a whisper in his mind. He understood what he had to do. If he connected himself to the armor, let it scan his neural patterns, it might be enough to restart the bonding process. The armor would reject him, of course. He was not Kelthari. He was not royal. He was wrong in every possible way. But if he could hold on long enough, if he could give the armor enough energy to remember itself, then maybe it could reconnect with the queen afterward. It was a terrible plan. Dangerous and stupid and probably impossible. Teho did it anyway. He placed his hands on the core matrix. The crystal was cold against his palms. He closed his eyes and focused, opening his mind to the armor. The connection happened instantly. Pain exploded through his body. It felt like fire and ice at the same time, burning and freezing every nerve. The armor was scanning him, reading him, trying to understand what he was, and it was rejecting him. Waves of energy pushed against his mind. The armor did not want him. He was alien, foreign, incompatible. Every cell in its body screamed for him to let go, but Teho held on. He had repaired engines in the vacuum of space, his fingers freezing as he worked. He had rebuilt power cores while radiation burned his skin. He had faced death 100 times, and never let go of his tools. He would not let go now. "I am not your enemy," he gasped through the pain. "I am trying to help you." The armor fought harder. The lights inside the core matrix spun wildly, chaotically. Teho felt his consciousness slipping, felt the darkness at the edge of his vision. But deep within the chaos, he found something else. A spark. A tiny light that was not fighting him. It was watching him, studying him. Curious, Teho reached for that spark with everything he had. "I see you," he whispered. "I see what you are. You are not just armor. You are memories. You are history. You are the legacy of 12 queens. 800 years of hopes and dreams and sacrifices." The spark flickered brighter. "You are not dying," Teho continued. "You are sleeping. You just need someone to wake you up." He poured his will into the connection. Not force, but invitation. Not demand, but request. He was not trying to control the armor. He was asking it to live. The spark exploded. Light filled the chamber. The core matrix blazed with colors Teho had never seen, colors that had no names in any human language. The threads of light throughout the armor flared to life, pulsing with energy. The crystals sang a tone so beautiful that tears streamed down Teho's face. The armor was awake. Teho released his hands and stumbled backward, gasping for breath. His entire body trembled. His vision was blurry. But he was alive, and the armor was alive too. It glowed with brilliant gold light, brighter than it had shone in centuries. The damage was healing, the metal flowing back together, the crystals repairing themselves. It was beautiful. It was miraculous. It was working. Teho laughed weakly and collapsed onto the floor. He had done it. He had actually done it. But as he lay there, catching his breath, he did not notice something strange. The armor was not just glowing gold. Within the gold, there were threads of another color, a soft blue that matched the patterns on Teho's neural scanner, his resonance pattern. In saving the armor, he had left a piece of himself inside it. A permanent imprint, woven into the ancient code. He did not know what that meant. Not yet. But in the throne room above, ancient warning systems flickered to life for the first time in 1,000 years. And in her private chambers, Queen Vera felt something she had not felt since the assassination attempt. Her armor was calling to her, and it was not calling alone. The day of the Unity Summit arrived like a storm. Ships from across the galaxy filled the space around Throne Station Arindis. Representatives from 100 civilizations descended upon the palace. Warriors, diplomats, merchants, and spies. They all came to see the Kelthari queen and judge her strength. Teho watched the preparations from a small balcony near the lower levels. He had finished his work. The crown armor was restored. Queen Vera had sent a brief message of acknowledgement. Nothing more. He assumed his job was done. He planned to return to his repair stall, return to his simple life, forget that any of this had ever happened. But Harin found him before he could leave. "The Queen requests your presence at the summit," she said. Taeho frowned. "Why?" "The armor is fixed. My work is complete." Harin's patterns flickered with uncertainty. "I do not know. But the Queen's requests are not optional." So Taeho found himself dressed in formal clothes, standing at the back of the great amphitheater where the summit was being held. Thousands of beings filled the massive space. Kelthari nobles sat in the front rows, their armor gleaming. Behind them sat representatives from alien civilizations, each delegation wearing the colors and symbols of their people. At the very back, almost invisible among the crowd, stood Taeho. He felt out of place. He felt like a mistake that had somehow wandered into history. Trumpets sounded. The crowd fell silent. Massive doors opened at the front of the amphitheater, and Queen Vera entered. She wore the crown armor. Taeho's breath caught in his throat. He had repaired that armor. He had held it in his hands, felt its dying pulse, fought through pain to bring it back to life. But seeing it now, on the Queen, was something else entirely. The armor blazed with golden light. It fit her perfectly, flowing with her movements like a second skin. The crystals shone like stars, and the threads of light pulsed with power. She looked like a goddess. She looked invincible. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Queen was whole. The crown armor lived. The fears of weakness, of decline, melted away in the brilliance of that golden glow. Queen Vera walked toward her throne at the center of the amphitheater. Her head was high, her steps confident. She had won. The summit would see her strength and respect it. But then something strange happened. The patterns on the armor began to shift. The golden lights swirled and changed, forming symbols that had not appeared in centuries. Ancient Kelthari script. Words from a time before the current empire existed. The cheering stopped. Whispers replaced it. Taeho did not understand Kelthari writing, but he could see the confusion spreading through the crowd. Nobles leaned forward, squinting at the symbols. Elders gasped and covered their mouths. One word spread through the amphitheater like fire. Velkara. Taeho felt the eyes turning toward him. Not all at once, but slowly, wave by wave, as if the crowd was a single organism, searching for something. An elder advisor stepped forward, his face pale. He was ancient, one of the oldest Kelthari in the empire. His patterns flickered with shock. "The armor shows 2 resonant signatures," he announced, his voice trembling. "The Queen's bloodline, as expected, but also another, the signature of one who is not Kelthari." More whispers, more stares. Taeho felt sweat forming on his forehead. "By ancient law," the elder continued, "the one who restores and bonds with the crown armor becomes Velkara, the shield consort, the Queen's eternal partner." The amphitheater exploded. Nobles shouted in outrage. Generals rose from their seats, hands on weapons. Representatives from other civilizations watched with fascination and amusement. This was better than any political drama they had expected. Guards pushed through the crowd toward Taeho. They grabbed his arms and dragged him forward, through the masses, toward the center of the amphitheater. He tried to protest, but his voice was lost in the chaos. He tried to explain, but nobody was listening. Before he knew it, he was standing directly in front of Queen Vera, the entire galaxy watching. Queen Vera's face was a mask of ice. Her patterns showed nothing, no emotion at all. But her eyes, those sharp silver eyes, were fixed on Taeho, with an intensity that made him want to disappear. "You," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The amphitheater fell silent. "You bonded with my armor." Taeho swallowed hard. "I did not mean to. I was trying to restart the core matrix. It needed a neural pattern to jumpstart the bonding process. I did not know it would keep my signature." "You did not know?" An advisor stepped forward, his patterns red with fury. "You expect us to believe that? A human? Bonding with the sacred crown armor? This is sabotage. This is an attack on our empire. Other nobles joined the shouting. Accusations flew through the air. Spy, assassin, agent of humanity, trying to infiltrate the Kelthari throne. Teho stood still and silent. There was nothing he could say. Nothing he could do. He had fixed the armor and accidentally become married to the queen. It would have been funny if it was not so terrifying. Queen Vera raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent once more. The ancient law is clear, the elder advisor said quietly. The armor has chosen. To reject the Velkara is to reject the armor's blessing. It would invalidate the queen's right to wear the crown armor. It would invalidate her claim to the throne. Then we remove the human signature, a general suggested. Purge it from the armor. That is impossible, the elder replied. The signatures are woven together now. They cannot be separated without destroying the armor itself. Silence stretched across the amphitheater. Everyone understood the situation. The queen could not reject Teho without losing her crown. She could not accept him without accepting a human as her consort. She was trapped, and so was he. Queen Vera looked at Teho. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. The mechanic and the queen. The human and the alien. Two people who had never wanted this. Bound together by accident and ancient law. Then Queen Vera spoke. The Unity Summit will continue tomorrow. Tonight, we will consider this matter privately. The human will remain in the palace. She turned and walked away, her golden armor blazing, the symbols of bonding still glowing on her chest. The crowd parted for her. Nobody dared speak. Nobody dared move. Teho was left standing alone in the center of the amphitheater, feeling the weight of 1,000 stares, 1,000 judgments, 1,000 questions. What had he done? Guards escorted him to a chamber in the palace. It was comfortable, with a soft bed and beautiful decorations. But it was also locked. He was a prisoner, though a well-treated one. Teho sat on the bed and buried his face in his hands. He had just wanted to fix the armor. He had just wanted to help. He never imagined that helping would lead to this. A husband. He was apparently now the husband of an alien queen, or at least something close to it. The Velkara, the shield consort, the eternal partner. He laughed bitterly. His mother had always wanted him to get married. She probably had not imagined it would happen like this. The door opened, and Harin entered. Her patterns were a swirl of emotions, too many to identify. The queen will see you tomorrow, she said, after the summit concludes. Is she angry? Teho asked. Harin hesitated. She is. Complicated. She did not ask for this. But she does not blame you either. She saw your work. She felt the armor's gratitude. Gratitude? The crown armor has memories, feelings. It knows you saved it. It chose to keep your signature because it trusts you. Teho stared at her. The armor trusted him. An 800-year-old living machine trusted him. This is insane, he muttered. Yes, Harin agreed. But it is also real. You should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult. She left, and Teho was alone again. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he thought about the armor, about the queen, about the impossible situation he had created. Somewhere in the palace, Queen Vera was thinking the same thoughts. And neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. The Unity Summit concluded in chaos. Delegations left confused and entertained, carrying stories of the human mechanic who had accidentally married the Kelthari queen. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy. By the next day, every inhabited world knew the name Kang Teho. He did not enjoy the fame. In the palace, factions formed and clashed. Some nobles demanded Teho's execution, claiming the bonding was a trick or an attack. Others saw opportunity, hoping to use the situation to weaken the queen. A small few suggested acceptance, arguing that ancient law should be respected. Queen Vera summoned Teho to her private chambers 3 days after the summit. It was the first time they had spoken since the public revelation. She sat by a window that looked out over the stars. Without her armor, she looked almost fragile, almost human. But her eyes still held that sharp intelligence. that calculating focus. "Sit," she said. It was not a request. Taeho sat across from her. Neither spoke for a long moment. "I do not blame you," Vera finally said. "I have reviewed the recordings from your workshop. I saw what you did. The pain you endured. The risk you took. You could have died. The armor needed help," Taeho said simply. "I could not let it die, even knowing the risk. Risk is part of every repair job. Sometimes the engine explodes. Sometimes it does not. You do the work anyway." Vera studied him with those silver eyes. "You are strange, human. Most would have demanded rewards. Fame. Power. You asked for nothing. I did not do it for rewards." Then why? Taeho thought about the question. Why had he risked everything to save an alien queen's armor? He had asked himself the same thing many times. "Because it was broken," he said finally. "And I could fix it. That is enough." Vera was silent again. Her patterns shifted slowly, colors Taeho could not identify. "I did not choose you," she said quietly. "I did not want a consort. I have spent my life fighting for my throne, proving myself worthy despite my youth and my gender. I earned my crown through blood and sacrifice. And now," she gestured vaguely at Taeho, "now I am bonded to a human mechanic from the outer colonies. A man I do not know. A man I did not choose." "I understand," Taeho said. "Do you?" "Yes. I did not choose this either. I came to your station looking for simple work. I wanted to stay invisible, stay uninvolved. And now, I am apparently your husband." Vera almost smiled. Almost. The word is Velkara. It means shield consort, partner in battle and in life. The ancient queens relied on their Velkara to watch their backs, to protect them from treachery. "I am not much of a warrior." "No, you are not." She stood and walked to the window. "That is the problem." Before Taeho could respond, the doors burst open. A tall Kelthari male strode into the room, followed by a group of soldiers. His armor was red and black, and his patterns blazed with fury. "General Duhan," Vera said coldly, "you were not invited. I do not need an invitation to challenge an insult to our empire." Duhan snarled. He pointed at Taeho. "This creature cannot be Velkara. He is weak. He is primitive. He is unworthy. Mauli. 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 Mauli." The armor chose him. The armor was corrupted by human trickery. "I demand the right of challenge." The room went silent. Even Vera's guards seemed uncertain. "What challenge?" Taeho asked. Duhan smiled cruelly. "The trial of blades, an ancient tradition. If you are truly worthy of being Velkara, you will prove it in combat against a champion of the Empire." "And if he refuses?" Vera asked. "Then he admits his unworthiness. The bonding will be considered void. And you, my queen, will need a new consort." Duhan's smile widened. "I would be honored to volunteer." Taeho understood now. Duhan wanted the throne. He had always wanted the throne. By challenging Taeho, he could remove the human obstacle and claim Vera for himself. "I cannot fight," Taeho said. "I am not a warrior. I have never held a blade in my life." "Then you forfeit." "No." Vera's voice was ice. "I will not allow the crown armor's choice to be dismissed by political games." "It is ancient law," Duhan replied. "You cannot refuse. Unless you wish to declare yourself above the traditions of our ancestors?" Vera's patterns flashed red. She was trapped again. If she protected Taeho from the challenge, she would appear weak, afraid of tradition. Her enemies would use it against her. Taeho stood. Everyone turned to look at him. "I accept the challenge," he said. Duhan laughed. "You? A tiny human against our greatest warriors? You will die in seconds." "Maybe." Taeho agreed. But I will not let the queen suffer for my mistake. If fighting is what it takes to prove myself, then I will fight. Vera stared at him. Her patterns shifted to something he had not seen before. Purple and gold mixed together. Surprise, and something else. You would die for me? She asked quietly. I fixed your armor, Taeho said. I feel responsible for it now. And you wear the armor. So I suppose I feel responsible for you too, Duhan snorted. Touching. But meaningless. The trial will be held tomorrow at noon. Prepare yourself, human. Or prepare to die. He turned and marched out, his soldiers following. Vera and Taeho were left alone. You should not have accepted, Vera said. The Trial of Blades is designed for warriors born into combat. You have no chance. Probably not. Then why? Taeho shrugged. Because running away has never solved anything. Whatever happens tomorrow, I will face it. That is all I can do. Vera looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She bowed her head slightly. A gesture of respect that queens did not give to commoners. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said. It was the same thing she had said when they first met. Still both, Taeho replied. That night, Taeho could not sleep. He sat in his chamber, staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. He was going to die. He knew it, with certainty. Duhan would send his best warrior, someone who had trained for decades, and Taeho would face them with nothing but mechanic's hands and a stubborn heart. But he had meant what he said. He would not run. He would not hide. He had made this mess, and he would face the consequences. Harin visited him near midnight. She brought food he did not eat, and water he did not drink. The queen is upset, she said. I have never seen her like this. Tell her not to worry. I will try not to embarrass her too badly. Harin's patterns flickered with sadness. You should not joke about this. If I do not joke, I will scream, Taeho admitted. This is how I handle fear. Harin sat beside him. Is there anything I can do? Taeho thought about it. Then he nodded. Bring me information. Everything you have about Kelthari armor. Every diagram. Every technical document. Every maintenance report. Why? Taeho smiled grimly. Because I am a mechanic. I do not know how to fight warriors, but I know how to take apart machines. Harin did not understand. But she brought him the documents anyway. Taeho studied until dawn. He memorized every joint, every connection, every weakness in Kelthari armor design. He learned where the power couplings were vulnerable. He learned where the neural links could be disrupted. He could not beat a warrior at combat. But maybe, just maybe, he could beat the warrior's machine. When the sun rose over Throne Station Arindis, Taeho was ready, or as ready as he would ever be. The arena was ancient. It had stood for 1,000 years. Witness to countless battles, countless trials, countless deaths. Stone walls rose high on every side, carved with the names of warriors who had fought and died within. Today, it would witness something new. A human against a Kelthari champion. The crowd filled every seat. Nobles and commoners pressed together, united in their curiosity. Word had spread across the station and beyond. Millions watched through broadcast feeds. The galaxy wanted to see the strange human mechanic who claimed to be the Queen's Velkara. They wanted to see him die. Taeho stood at one end of the arena, wearing simple clothes that left his arms free. He carried no weapons. He had been offered a sword, a spear, a shield, but he had refused them all. He did not know how to use them. They would only slow him down. At the other end stood his opponent. General Duhan had chosen himself as the champion. He wore full battle armor, red and black metal gleaming in the sunlight. In his hands, he carried a massive blade that crackled with energy. His patterns burned bright red with anticipated victory. Queen Vera sat on a throne above the arena. She wore her crown armor, and it glowed with nervous gold. The symbols of bonding were still visible on the chest, showing Taeho's resonance alongside her own. She had not spoken to him since last night, but her eyes never left him. The elder advisor stood between the two fighters, His voice amplified across the arena. This is the trial of blades. An ancient test of worthiness. The challenger seeks to prove that Kang Tae-ho is unworthy of the title Velkara. Kang Tae-ho seeks to prove his right to stand beside the queen. He paused, looking at Tae-ho with something like pity. The trial ends when one fighter cannot continue. There are no other rules. May the ancestors guide your hands. He retreated to the edge of the arena. A bell rang. The trial began. Du-han charged immediately. He was fast. Impossibly fast for someone in heavy armor. His blade sang through the air, aimed at Tae-ho's head. Tae-ho dove to the side. The blade missed him by inches. He rolled across the stone floor and came up running. The crowd laughed. The human was fleeing. The human was a coward, but Tae-ho was not fleeing. He was watching. Du-han pursued him across the arena, swinging his blade in devastating arcs. Each swing could have cut through steel. Each swing could have killed Tae-ho instantly. Tae-ho dodged, ducked, rolled, and ran. He did not try to fight back. He did not try to counterattack. He simply survived, staying one step ahead of the deadly blade. And he watched. He watched Du-han's footwork. The general favored his right leg, pushing off it for powerful lunges. His left leg was slightly slower, slightly weaker. He watched Du-han's armor. The joints at the elbows and knees were complex, with multiple moving parts. The power coupling on the left side of the chest pulsed with blue light, feeding energy throughout the suit. He watched Du-han's patterns. The red was fading slightly, replaced by flickers of orange. Frustration. Annoyance. The general had expected an easy victory. He was not getting one. "Stop running, coward," Du-han roared. He lunged forward, his blade aimed at Tae-ho's chest. Tae-ho sidestepped at the last instant. The blade passed so close he felt the heat of its energy field. As Du-han stumbled past, Tae-ho reached out and touched the general's elbow joint. Just touched. Nothing more. Du-han spun around and swung again. Tae-ho jumped backward, barely avoiding the strike. But now Tae-ho knew. His fingers had felt the mechanism inside the joint. He understood how it worked, and he understood how to break it. The fight continued. Du-han attacked with increasing fury. Tae-ho continued to dodge, continued to survive, continued to watch and learn. Each time Du-han got close, Tae-ho touched his armor somewhere. A tap on the knee joint. A brush against the shoulder plate. A finger on the power coupling. The crowd did not understand what he was doing. They thought he was desperate, flailing, pathetic. They laughed and jeered, but Queen Vera watched with narrowed eyes. Her patterns shifted to purple and gold. She was beginning to understand. Tae-ho was not fighting like a warrior. He was fighting like an engineer. Du-han lunged again, faster than before. This time, Tae-ho was not quick enough. The blade caught his arm, slicing through flesh. Blood sprayed across the stone floor. Tae-ho gasped in pain but kept moving. The wound was deep, but not fatal. He could still fight. He had to still fight. "First blood," Du-han shouted triumphantly. "You cannot run forever, human. Soon I will end this." Tae-ho's vision blurred from the pain. But his mind was clear. He had gathered enough information. He understood Du-han's armor completely now. It was time. Du-han charged again. His blade rose for what he intended to be the killing blow. The crowd held its breath. Tae-ho did not dodge this time. Instead, he stepped forward. Inside the arc of Du-han's swing, the blade passed harmlessly behind him. For one heartbeat, they were face to face. Du-han's eyes widened in surprise. Tae-ho's hand shot out, not toward Du-han's body, not toward his head, toward the power coupling on the left side of his chest. His fingers found the weak point he had identified, the same flaw he had seen in a dozen salvaged suits over the years. A small gap between the primary and secondary power lines, just wide enough for a mechanic's fingers. Tae-ho pushed. The power coupling cracked. Energy surged through the armor, feeding back into itself. Du-han's Velshar locked up. every joint freezing at once. The general toppled like a statue, crashing to the ground in a heap of paralyzed metal. His blade clattered away, out of reach. He tried to move, tried to rise, but his armor would not respond. The arena fell silent. Taeho stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard, bleeding from his wounded arm. His body trembled with exhaustion. But he was standing. He had won. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The crowd did not know how to react. They had expected blood and death and violence. Instead, they had witnessed something they did not understand. Queen Vera rose from her throne. Her patterns blazed with brilliant gold, the color of joy. "The trial is complete," she declared, her voice echoing across the arena. "Kang Taeho has proven his worth. The armor's choice stands. He is Velkara." The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some cursed. Most simply stared in disbelief. Duhan's soldiers rushed to their fallen general, working frantically to restore power to his armor. The general's patterns burned with humiliation and fury. He had been defeated by a human, by a mechanic. By a man who had never held a sword. Taeho swayed on his feet. The blood loss was catching up with him. His vision darkened at the edges. Strong hands caught him before he fell. He looked up and saw Queen Vera herself, her golden armor gleaming. "You fool," she said softly. "You brave, stubborn fool. Did I embarrass you?" Taeho managed to ask. "You terrified me." Her patterns flickered. "I thought you were going to die." "So did I." She laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. It was a beautiful sound. Medical staff surrounded them, taking Taeho from the queen's arms, tending to his wounds. But her eyes stayed on him as they carried him away. Later that night, after his arm had been healed and his strength restored, Vera visited his chamber. She came alone, without guards or servants. She sat beside his bed and studied him with those silver eyes. "You are strange," she said. It seemed to be her favorite thing to say to him. "So I have been told. You do not think like a warrior. You do not fight like a warrior. And yet you defeated one of our greatest generals." "I am a mechanic," Taeho said. "I do not know how to fight warriors, but I know how to break machines." Vera was silent for a moment. Then she shook her head slowly. "My ancestors must be laughing. They created the trial of blades to test courage and strength. Instead, they got a human who wins by knowing where to poke. Is that bad? No." She looked at him differently now. Not with love. Not yet. But with something new. Respect. Curiosity. Interest. It is different. And perhaps, different is what this empire needs. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I still did not choose you," she said quietly. "I still do not know you. But I am willing to learn, if you are willing to teach." Taeho smiled despite his exhaustion. "I am a mechanic. Teaching is just explaining how things work. I can do that." Vera almost smiled back. "Then rest, my Velkara. Tomorrow, we begin learning." 4. She left, and Taeho was alone. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, he had been a nobody, a drifting mechanic, invisible and unimportant. Now he was the consort of an alien queen, bound to her by ancient law and living armor. It was insane. It was impossible. It was completely ridiculous. But as Taeho closed his eyes, he found himself smiling. He had fixed an empire's greatest treasure. He had survived an impossible trial. And he had earned the respect of a queen who had never respected anyone. Not bad for a mechanic from Settlement 7. And so began the legend of Kang Taeho, the man who fixed an alien queen's armor and accidentally became her husband. The man who fought with his mind instead of his fists. The man who looked at an empire and saw a machine waiting to be repaired. His story was just beginning.